Hello everyone and welcome to Project Insights Project Management webinar. The topic for today is part 2 of how to start a project on the right track. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please go ahead and type those into your question box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar dashboard. And for all other questions, and for all other PMs, trainings are valid for one PDU free of charge. However, you must be in attendance for the full session. I will email you your PDU certificate by the end of today. So I do ask that you please hold off on emailing me about your certificate until then. And for all other PDU information, please visit our PI community, type in PDU in the search, and you will find the PMI rules in an article called Webinars and PDUs. Also, for those interested, please note that the recording and slides will be available within our Project Insight community, and they will also be sent to you via email by tomorrow. My name is Denise, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm on the marketing team here at Project Insight. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. If you're not already familiar with Project Insight, we're a cloud-based project management solution. We work with two kinds of companies, those that are rapidly growing and need to scale the way they are managing their projects, and those who want greater visibility across their project portfolio, want more insight into the workloads of their resources, and want a better way to collaborate on projects among team members. If any of these sound familiar to you and you'd like to learn more, please feel free to give us a call, send us an email, or of course you can always request your free customized demo at projectinsight.net. We'd like to give a very warm welcome to our presenter today, Diane White. She's an instructor and curriculum development. She's in instructor and curriculum development at Core Performance Concepts. Diane Buckley, as you know, she's usually our presenter here. She was unable to make it, but we have Diane who has been with us before, and she's a great presenter. So a little bit about her. She was a program and portfolio manager in strategy and planning for Verizon Communications. Project manager, she retired after 28 years. She's been a PMP since 2000 and PMI member since 1996. She's also a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, a certified Scrum Master, a Master's Certificate in Project Management from George Washington University. So thank you, Diane, so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for the grand introduction.
Thank you for joining us. All right, so with that said, I'm going to let you take over.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Denise. And so today we're going to talk about how to start a project on the right track. And the second part of our webinar series during the month, as you recall, if you've been joining the webinars before, is putting the PM in practice. So today we're going to expand on the topic that Diane Buckley introduced, mainly the project charter. We're going to tie that into today's by doing a brief review. So if you didn't, or if you weren't able to participate for the last webinar, then you will be perfectly fine because I'll review and we'll talk about a sample project charter that she started with an artist website for our art gallery. So the really cool thing about today is that we take questions from the audience. So some of the questions that were already sent in the last 2 weeks since the last webinar are incorporated into the slideshow, which is very exciting. And also you can put questions in the chat. So as you go through, think of your own questions, put them in the chat. I'll ask Denise to maybe say there's a question, or you can chime in and say we have a question about something, and that's perfectly fine. Also, I'll be maybe throwing out some questions to get some interaction. So this webinar and series today is very interactive, and to make the most of it, please feel free to put your questions, your comments into the chat so we'll be able to incorporate that. So here we are. We're going to go ahead and get started, how to start a project on the right track, the second part, which is a PM in practice. And for those of you who joined the last time or who perhaps are new, we talked through an example of a project charter. And the first thing we need to understand and discuss with our sponsor is understanding the need. And so what do we mean by that? Well, we want to really open a dialogue with our sponsor and our major stakeholders at the very beginning of the project. And the project charter is a structured way to have that conversation. And understanding the need is really about asking those open-ended questions and getting an open dialogue so we all understand what it is that we're doing. What does the project mean? How does it feel? How does it sound from our stakeholder perspective? Because we're really talking about the business need. And I know my experience with Verizon Telecommunications, it was all about what is the project from the business perspective? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And we're all in this together kind of thing. So what do we need to understand the need from a business perspective and from our customer's perspective? So just so we're all on the same page about what a project charter is, the classic definition from the PMBOK guide, of course, is, you can see there. So we're really talking about a document issued by the sponsor. Ideally, it is issued by the sponsor, and there's a question later on, like, well, what if we don't have a charter? What if the project charter is not, issued by the sponsor? What if we don't have one? So we'll be talking about that. You may want to think about your own questions around that too. And also it gives you formal authority to start the project and to start spending money, getting resources, and of course having your kickoff meeting and your project meetings. So I look at the project charter as a tool to have these conversations, to make something official, and to start our dialogue. So that's really what I view it as, is a tool. And we can put change control and formal processes around project charters. And project charters also may come from business cases as well. So here's our first question that came in since the last webinar. Can chartering methodology be applied by doing work in a PMO, such as keeping track of guidance documentation? So that's a great question. I think the way I took the question, and if the person who asked this is on the webinar, they can feel free to expand and make sure I understand it right. So my understanding was I have a PMO, and PMOs can also implement projects. When I was a PMO, we did lots of projects. A lot of the projects we implemented were coming up with implementing guidelines and procedures. And so I would say absolutely yes, assuming that it is a project and your project is to keep track of guidance documents. How are we managing the project? How are we initiating it? So I think what I'd like to point out for this question is when you're implementing a project, it doesn't matter what project it is, if it's PMO or from outside stakeholder or internal stakeholder or sponsor, then absolutely yes, the project charter is applicable. If it's continuing operations, once a new procedure, the PMO's procedure is established, and then we're in maintenance mode, it's like any other continuing operation. So what I wanted to point out here is take this question to say that there's a difference between a project and continuing operations. And so that continuing operations would be in maintenance mode, which traditionally is not considered a project. So I wanted to see what your thoughts are if you have any ideas on PMOs and starting projects and the difference between a project and continuing operations, feel free to put that in the chat. So when we're talking about projects in Project Charter, we're really talking about initiating a new project that has a team, a scope, budget, and of course a schedule. So let's talk a little bit about the components, and I know you went through a project charter last time, but let's just briefly explain project charter. And the first thing in the format would be a brief description of the project, product, or service. And last time you went through one that was an artist website. So the artist website project charter from last time, from the last webinar, was about creating a new website that allows customers from an art gallery, for example, and we'll use this example to talk through the different components of a charter. And what the artist gallery wants to do is to talk about the website as a way to showcase the artists and have the artists really be able to connect with their customers in the gallery. And what I like about that is we're really talking about what when we're briefly describing the project or service. The what in terms of our customers. What do we want to accomplish from a business perspective? And I like that. I like the way that that is phrased in understanding the what and just adding a little bit to from a business perspective. So let me bring up that project charter for just a moment to give you a visual. I like visuals, always good. Hopefully you can see the charter here, which is the first part is describing the project description and also what the example here is. Create a new website that allows our customers to view art that's on display and allows them to connect directly with each artist. So that is the what. And then the template here kind of tied that main question into what we're talking about there, the what. What is it that we are trying to accomplish? So here's a good tie-in question here. And after this question, Denise will see if there's any questions in the chat. We can expand on anything we've talked about so far. So on this question, it's asking, what would you do if you take over an existing project and there was no project charter previously? Oh, that never happens to anybody, does it? I think I get this question so many times when I teach project management classes and the PMP prep. This is a great question for the PMP prep exam too. It always comes up because the reality is we don't always have a charter. And for many years I was on rescue projects where Diane goes in and project's in trouble, and I did this for about a year and a half. It's very difficult to go into a project and rescue it and find out what's going on. And a lot of times, so many times the root cause of projects in trouble was there was no project charter. It was not a business case. And so, yeah, what do you do? So when I mentioned the project charter is a tool for starting a conversation. So the first thing that I do is use the charter as a tool for the dialogue, the conversation. It doesn't really matter what phase the project is. It's usually if a project's in trouble or it's an existing project and they don't have a charter. Even if they're not in trouble, it's a good place to establish rapport and to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So yeah, what I would do is use that template as a discussion guide and to go through the different components of the template and have a guided discussion. And then I can use that to jot notes on, and eventually it can be used a template to create a project charter. To be honest, we don't always have business analysts on our projects. I don't know your experience, but many times as project managers, we sometimes end up creating a charter for our stakeholders. And for me personally, if I don't have a BA, I will create one because it helps document discussion, and also is a document that we can use during our project team meetings to go over and verify the different components. Are these still valid? Because I like to say that project chart or any of our documentations is not one and done. We always want to make sure that we're um, reviewing our documentation, our understandings, and testing our assumptions, looking at our risks, and all those good things that make up a charter. So, Denise, do we have any questions or comments about any of the two questions or about how to use the project charter as a tool?
We don't have any questions yet, but I do have some comments here from people who were unable to attend the first session. So I will go ahead and send you the link to the first session so you can review it and then maybe get that template of the project charter. But in the meantime, guys, please go ahead and plug in your questions or comments, and Diane will
Yeah,
send
has
them.
anybody, yeah, thank you, Denise. Has anybody had any experience where there was no charter and you had to go into a project, maybe take over an existing project, there wasn't any charter? Did you use a charter or some other tool to start the dialogue and a conversation? How did it work? I find personally, while we're waiting for any feedback, is that it works very well. And to be honest, there's two reasons of my experience, two main reasons project failed. There's many, but the two top seem to be stakeholder communication and lack of really clarity on what the project is. And so I think going through the discussion and using the project charter as a tool really kind of covers both, because you're really listening to the stakeholder and the sponsor. A lot of times they don't feel like they've been listened to, and they haven't been heard. And lack of clarity if nothing's in writing, although they might be resistant a little bit to putting things in writing, as they see through conversation and meeting and that you're really listening to them, listening to their concerns and listening for the business need, they end up really appreciating, and that attitude just turns right around. You know, it obviously takes some time and communication skills, but they end up really appreciating the having a document, a project charter. And the good thing is that they will, once they're used to doing that, the next time they have a project, oh, well, let's do a project charter. And it really is really kind of neat to see how that snowballs, you might say. Any other questions or comments about that, Denise?
Here we have actually someone who's sharing, Anne-Marie, who shares that, yes, she took over a project and she used the charter to get back on track. So one of the challenges for her was that some thought the scope was one thing while others thought, the scope was a different thing with the end goal and all that. So the project charter pretty much brought them clarity, and they hated doing it.
Oh yes, they do, don't they? You're absolutely right. Yes, it does bring them clarity. Hopefully, they don't like doing it, and they just resist it. And they want the project, they love the project, but I think that with time and practice, I find that the stakeholders and sponsors, I've been through with it a couple times, then they come to me with their charters. Hey, look what I've got. So they're really enthusiastic, but it may take a little time to turn them around. But nothing turns around their attitude about a charter than a successful project. So yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. That was neat. Yeah, that was neat.
And here's the question for you, actually. Can this statement of work be used as a project charter?
Well, that's a very good question. Now, statements of work are usually in a contracting world, because when I worked with contracts a lot, statement of works were, in my experience, maybe didn't always work all-encompassing of the project. A statement of work might have been for a piece of the project. So I think we just have to be careful. Our statements of work, the answer is probably it depends. I would say that a business case is usually like on the program level perhaps, or maybe a huge project, you might have a business case. Business case may spawn separate projects. Same with the statement of work. If your statement of work covers everything that you want in the charter, the statement of work includes the whole project, then I'd say yes, but oftentimes the statement of work is a subcomponent of a project, may not be overarching of the whole project. So in that case, I would just be very careful, and I would imagine that your statement of work does include everything that you would want from a typical project charter. So an opportunity might be to review your statement of work and ask yourself and give it a test. Does this have all the elements that I would want to know from a standpoint of my project? And if it doesn't, then you can either adjust your statement of work or layer on top of that a project charter. All right, so let's go ahead to the next component, which is the business justification. And I like this because it really gets down to the why of the situation. So a lot of times, project team members, they like the why. I found they like to know, why am I doing this project? It's one of the first things in the kickoff meeting. It's out of their mouth, or when they first get assigned to the project. Diane, why are we doing this project? And they really want to know from the business perspective. And for the most part, project team members and people in general are curious people. You know, why are we doing? Why should I put my time and energy into this project? Which is a great question. And it really also focuses your sponsor, your stakeholders, on the business. What do they want to see from a business perspective? And yeah, they don't like it, but once they get used to defining what it is they really want to accomplish, they get kind of excited about it. Last couple of years with Verizon, I did a lot of governance projects, and governance, it means you have to do it because it's either a regulation, requirement from the Federal Trade Commission, for example, privacy, a lot of privacy projects, and they're usually things that aren't exciting. Coders, developers, project team members, even stakeholder sponsors, they like to do interesting, neat, new, great, exciting things like a new product offering. They don't really necessarily like to do the governance type project. So I had to be real creative with the why. Sometimes whys are easy. I couldn't just say because the government says so. A lot of times we get projects that, I know you don't get these projects that, oh, the CEO says so, the CIO says so, or my boss told me to do it kind of things. Hopefully, I know that never happens to anybody. But yeah, the ones that we get where we don't have a clear why are a little more challenging. And just because we're told to do it, it doesn't really make us want to get up in the morning and really work hard on that project. And so sometimes it gets creative, but trying to understand the why from the business perspective, even if we have to do it because government regulations. I'm sure a lot of you have on regulatory projects as well. I try to bring in rip from the headlines, like, hey, do you want to see our company? Do you want to see your project? Do you want to see us as a company, as a stakeholder in the company, as stockholders in the company? Do you want to see us in the headlines? Wow, look at this other company, and that kind of, just something to use a little bit of humor, but has a serious message into why we're doing the project. And yeah, that can get them excited, but more importantly, it really clarifies from the business perspective what is going on. And in addition, it also really kind of jumpstarts some of the requirements issues. So on our artist website project, let's see, business justification, they want to differentiate themselves from other art galleries in their market area. And then they want this interactive website so that customers can browse their art on display in the comfort of their home, for example, and look at the artist, get a feel for the artist, and then have that interaction. And they really are looking for a sense of community, which is kind of different than just a website. So that sense of community, and maybe even social media doesn't mention that here, but that's what really the look and feel for what I'm taking away from this charter is that's really what their business justification is. So if they differentiate themselves, yeah, they'll get hopefully more sales, but they'll always, also I believe will get that sense of community, that involvement that they're looking for. So another thing that I'm sure you do, and maybe I'm going to ask you also on this, so get ready. I'd like to, at this point, ask open-ended questions because I'm kind of reading in between the lines here. And just, someone gave me this, and I'm trying. I'm reading it over, trying to, get my questions in order. So I talk to my sponsor. So I like open-ended questions, and two of my favorites, and maybe you can put in the chat your favorite open-ended question. My two favorites are, tell me more about, and give me an example of. So maybe I'd say, tell me more about this community that you're thinking of. What would it look like? What would it feel like? What kind of interaction are you hoping to get with the artist? So I would really ask them to tell me more about that, would be an example. And what that does is when they start talking and say, these requirements will just start coming out. And then our next component, you'll start seeing more detail. We'll talk to in a minute, like more detail. So these really go together in my mind. So asking open-ended questions, and then tell me more about, can you give me an example of, maybe can you give me an example where you've seen something like this in action? Maybe, well, when I was in Phoenix last year, or when I was in Austin, Texas, they had this awesome website, blah, blah. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Let's, you can take a look at that and maybe get some ideas. So do you have any other favorite open-ended questions that you found successful? Anybody have any, Denise?
While we wait for those favorite open-ended questions, here's a question for you.
Sure.
What do you do if there is a variation in the SOW defined in the charter when you take over?
Okay, so I was kind of cautioning about statements of work, and one is that depending on where the variation is, but definitely the documents have to be aligned. We're going to talk about how to keep them aligned and change control. Some of the questions coming up, but the source could be lack of alignment through change control for the two documents. And the advantage of having a charter connected with or inserted in the statement of work is when the statement of work gets updated, the charter, which is either an attachment to it or in the body of the statement of work, would automatically, one would hope, get updated at the same time. So it could be that oftentimes I find that the charter doesn't always get up to date. It always doesn't. It's kept up to date. It's not always kept up to date. So the challenge is with all our documentation, isn't it, to keep everything in sync and up to date. So again, a statement of work may just be maybe we have a statement of work for the website developer, which is only part of the project. It doesn't maybe get in that other component of the artistic, the community aspect of our project from an artist standpoint. So really I would look for the root cause and see what you can do to fix that out of sync, because they definitely need to be in sync. Hope that helps with that question. So we already talked about major components. I showed you more details of the what. Again, drilling down on the detail. If at this point you have a good business analyst, they can help, and they're trained in all these techniques for eliciting requirements and really doing those techniques that BAs are very skilled at. If they don't have a BA, it really falls on me as a PM to do that role, which I have. I've done the elicitation before, and it really helps to have a good BA. When I have my favorite BAs assigned to my project, it just goes so much smoother for me anyway, especially if you've got one who's used to the regulatory environment, which I did the last few years of my career with Verizon. It really makes things so much easier. But we can be skilled and we can learn the skills, and we know how to question, we know how to communicate with people, and I learned a lot from my business analyst friends too. How to hone those skills, because that's what they're very good at, drilling down on requirements. So that's those two components. Oh, we have another question here from the audience. What do you think is the best way to get PMs that have not had standards to adopt them? Oh, that never happens either. I can see that some of you used to be in my next cubicle here. Yeah, so I think we've probably all been on the receiving end, perhaps, of having standards or things, maybe procedures. I won't say forced on us, but maybe, given to us, we'll say. So I think the person who sent this in probably had that experience. I think the best way with any change, and this goes with change, because projects create change too, and we're often not, real popular because we're creating change for people. So my first, I have about 3 points here. One is to show what's in it for them, and that's for any change. Yeah, we're no different. What's in it for me? Why should I change the way I'm doing things? It works fine. And so if you can show me an easier, better way, I'm all for it. I'm all in. So what is it? Is it going to save me time? Is it going to make my job easier? Is it going to save me time? Is it going to make my job easier? What's in it for me? Then the second thing is get their buy-in. I mean, the one time I was on the receiving end, and they put someone in charge of putting together these templates. All these templates. It sounded great. It's going to save me time. Love it. Well, they put someone in charge who's like, nothing against the person, but they were like a first-year project manager. And everybody in the PMO, we've been, 20 plus, years, some of us. And so right then, and they didn't ask for much input, hardly at all. So right then, didn't really get the buy-in, and there was not that much attendance at the meeting. We should have been, because it really could have helped us, but buy-in is so important. And if there had been a little more buy-in or some ways to help us feel more involved with the process, it would have gone, let's say, smoother. So maybe you have a great experience to share and some other ways. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to put my third one in, is lead by results. Get somebody who's an early adapter, or someone who's adapted the procedures or adopted them. Use testimonials. Like any of our projects, we roll them out. If we roll out pilots, we get people in our pilot project that are going to be really good spokespersons for the rest of the community. For example, when I did a call center change, we picked a few people in the call center, very experienced, get them excited about it, and then they spread the word to oh, look, this is cool, this is new. Yeah, it's a change in procedures, but it's really going to save us 2-3 minutes, and I've gotten some more revenue. I've closed deals faster because I can get through my questions and use the website faster, whatever. So if you can get some early adapters, people that are using it, and get them excited, and testimonials, it's kind of a third way to get people to accept the standards as well. Not that it's perfect, but I think those 3 ideas. Anybody have an experience, positive or negative, on that?
While we wait for those positive or negative experiences, I did want to share some of the open questions that people shared earlier. See what you think about those. So here's one that says, what do you think about ... and tell me about your expectations of project stakeholders and team members, and can you give me a definition of success? So those are just a couple.
Absolutely.
If there's any more, please feel free to share them.
Oh, absolutely. I like the one about success. We're going to talk about quantifiable and measurements, as success is a key one. So that's a perfect one. What does success look like to you? Can you give me an example of success? And so that kind of is hand-in-hand with what you mean by. Can you share? Can you give me examples? So any of those open-ended questions, especially the one about success, because when we get down to that category in the charter, I think that's one of the most, my experience, that and risk are the 2 of the most underutilized areas of a project charter. They're very, very key, very important. All right, well, thanks for sharing those open-ended questions. Anybody else have any other comments about getting people to adopt
Yes,
standards?
we actually have one right here. So I'm currently implementing a PMO, and the PMs have not had standards, and having half are not willing to adopt because it's holding them accountable to comply.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, that's a tough one. But I still think I'd like to go back to perhaps getting their buy-in. And, it could be that they're resisting, yes, because they don't want to be accountable, and there's probably not a lot you can do about that. But I would sneak in the back door, so to speak, and um, show how it's going to make their life easier, faster, um, get better results. And we all like to, perhaps even get kudos. I don't know about promotions these days; they're not, easy to come by. But awards or kudos, or knowing that person is going to be key. If it's truly about maybe they're just unsure. Maybe I don't want to say insecure, but maybe they're not confident enough in their abilities. Don't know, but I would maybe try to get to know the person, and you're probably right, spot on. It may be accountable, but again, I kind of like those open-ended questions. I try to find out what it would take to adopt the standards. What it would take to do it. It could be a training issue, it could be a multiple things. So it's kind of hard to know without knowing the person. But that would be the place to start, is try to find out, dig a little deeper. It's probably more, it could be more than that. Who knows? Anyway, that would be what I would do. Okay, project objectives and deliverables. These are what we kind of are kind of used to seeing as far as requirements, but I like the proof aspect, because what we're really trying to do is to say, um, what are the measurements? We went back and, one of the questions was that open-ended comment about the success criteria. So this is a key one, is what does success look like? What's the proof? How will I know when it's done? And having those conversations early on is so key, because you really have to start and get that nailed down up front. And projects that don't have a charter, haven't had these conversations, are very difficult to close out. Because when we close out the project, we want to say, get their sign off. So a lot of times we don't ever close a project. I know that never happens to you, but they're hesitant to sign off. They don't want to let go of the project. And so getting that sign-off is very difficult. We don't have the criteria established up front. So I hear that so many times. I can't get them to sign off. I can't get this project closed. Well, what are the criteria? What does success look like? We haven't had that conversation for 6 months, and now we're asking them to close out the project, and they're going, no, So there's nothing to say, I'm done. So those things start the conversation early, start the conversation on success criteria up front, and review it often. This goes back to the charter. It's not a one and done, because what success looks like from day one may change a little bit as the project gets more clarity. So yeah, review and revise that often, and get those measurements, acceptance criteria, quality criteria. Speed of the website might be a quality criteria, for example. Let's see what else on our website perspective. Um, okay, so two things that we have so far is they want every artist on the website. So if I have 10 artists, there's got to be 10 on the website. You can quantify that. There's a page for each artist. I count my artists. I count my pages. Okay, that's a criteria. It's measurable, right? We can count. It's measurable. And then, but again, if these criteria objectives aren't measurable, if they're not deliverable, then we still have those conversations, use open-ended questions to find out, more drill down as to what they are talking about. So yes, definitely, it's very, very important to get these things that will help close our projects early on. The proof right there. And the second one, the next one rather, is constraints and assumptions. Testing the limits. We all start projects with underlying assumptions regarding cost, scope, quality, and our constraints. We usually are very diligent about documenting them, but it's also important in your project meetings to test the assumptions as the projects go. Assumptions can turn into risks. Assumptions can turn into gotchas. Assumptions can really, come back to haunt you if you don't test them out during the project and meeting. Well, let's test this assumption out. Is this still valid? If it's passed and gone, fine. Document the outcome and then move on. But that's what I meant about it's a living document, and these things are documented and put down on paper for a reason, so we can go back and review any limitations that we have. So there's another great question. Many charters have a what's out section. Do you see value in having this section? Absolutely. You don't, if there's no specific box or section for what's out, then I would say you can use the constraints. You can use an assumptions area. You can also make it in the requirements area. This is not in scope. So any place you put it, it's always valuable to have what's out of scope. And again, if it's out of scope, test that assumption. Is this still out of scope? In a team meeting, I would select a couple areas to review each team meeting. Well, let's test these assumptions. Let's test this risk. Let's have a conversation about quality. Do these still feel right? Are they still good? Risks are another thing that we do test out. Risks are the known gotchas. We document these up front and we test them out as we go along. It doesn't, it's not full-blown risk management plan at this point, but it's a good idea to get the ones that we know in advance. One of the ones from our charter for the artists, what if the artists don't want to participate? What if they don't have the technical skills to participate? So if we don't get artist participation, we don't get 100%, that's going to hurt the concept, the feel of the community. And if the artist stuff isn't on their website, then their sales might suffer. So yeah, once you know what some of the gotchas are, then we can work toward the mitigation strategies. And then our remaining components are, of course, procurement. What do we have to buy? These are kind of standard components. What are our project team's key stakeholders? Who's important? We need those to get our project kicked off and have our meetings. And of course, who's the PM? Who's the sign-off? Who's our sponsor? Who's in charge? Who holds the money, right? Those are the other parts of the charter. Gives us a way to, again, spend money and get started. So here is another question for us. How do you make changes or updates to the document if you're gathering signatures at the beginning? All right. So the quick answer is change control. If it affects the general rule, if it affects time, scope, and quality or scope, then it's change control. As opposed to clarifications, sometimes there's a fine line, and we talk about that, and if it's really a clarification, then I don't usually go out for, if it doesn't affect time, scope, money, then I don't, go through change control for that. I just clarify, but if it really is going to change the project substantially, then I would go through and get new signatures and attach a change log, to the back or the front, of the cover page. There's another question about this too. So if you have any other comments about that, you can put them in. The next one is, how would you suggest making a living document when your company doesn't support that? Okay. I think there's value in having my own standards, even though there's no maybe official stance, maybe you don't have a PMO. As project manager, if I feel it's important, I'll implement it myself. And it's very interesting sometimes when people look over your shoulder and say, oh, I like that. Or in a team meeting, maybe just innocently share something. I tried this out, it's worked pretty well for me. And people like to emulate things at work. So I implemented my own change control when none existed. And again, I explained it up front, the process, And resistance, sure. Do they like change control? No. But they do see the value as the project succeeds and as the project progresses. So I would say if you feel value, if it's feel valuable, I would have that conversation right up front, and we're going to implement change control. Here's what it looks like, and here's the reason we're doing it. Try it out. See what happens. And I think that they will probably be supportive because they'll see the value, and we all want this to be successful is the way I would kind of like phrase that. And I'm going through these because they're all very much related, and then we'll ask for more questions to wrap us up here. But this one is, once you have a project schedule, would you still recommend keeping an updated project charter? Absolutely, absolutely, because the charter, again, is a living document. If there's something that changes my schedule, that's a major change. It has to go through change control, or it should go through change control. In my opinion, it has to. From a PMO perspective, when I was on projects that had a PMO, anything that was a change to scope, time, cost, or quality had to go and get PMO approval, because there's only so much money to go around. And if it increases the budget, then they have to look at it. Does the increase in budget, does it meet the business case? Does it meet the standards? If it changes the schedule, what does that do to, so many, there's a ripple effect. But if it was a clarification, and I just submitted as a clarification, then no problem. PMO just, okay, fine. Just had to have it on record, put it up in the cloud. It's project documentation. So yes, the project chart to me is just like any other of our documents, and I definitely keep it up to date. So Denise, do we have other questions or comments, especially around maybe change control or anything else on their mind?
See. Meanwhile, we wait for maybe one or two questions. You have a couple comments
Mm-hmm.
that state that, let's see. Oh, here's a question. Let's go into the question.
Yeah,
What
question.
are the typical reasons there is no project charter?
Typical reasons is for the, please feel free to put your, with your experience too, is I'd like to hear that, but the ones I've noticed are a sponsor, stakeholders don't have the, well, sometimes they don't have the time, usually, as they're, I don't have time to write a charter, but they want the project, right? That's a common one. And it could also be that they don't have that much maturity working with projects. And there's certain groups that, like the legal department, we don't do charters. That's their mentality. So work with them. And one time I had a lawyer, she was legal, she was my sponsor. It took a while, it took months, but she finally came around to the benefit of a charter, and she would help write it. At least she would, put the information down, and so she was, as time progressed, got more and more involved to even writing requirements, because she saw the benefit from a legal perspective. Again, it kind of saved her time, made her and the project more accountable. But a lot of times it's going to be time and maybe not as much experience with projects. Maybe they haven't been asked to do it before. Again, I go back to what's in it for them, what's in it for me. Anybody else have any ideas? That's when we ask for a business analyst, right? Get the business analyst involved early and get them to help the stakeholders and sponsor write up a charter. If they're really, really
Okay.
good.
Here's another question for you. Can you comment on a non-IT person project managing an IT project? Does a project manager need to be technically skilled? Ah.
Oh, wow. I've seen both sides of that. And when I started, I had somewhat of a technical background, but I wasn't as technical as the coders, for example. So I've been in that seat, more or less, and I got more experience as time went on. And so I really do see it both ways. One thing I do think is a benefit, because my training, my first degree was in education, and I actually taught high school for 4 years before I went into the other project management world. But I felt like the benefit to me was I had great rapport with people, with the client, the sponsors. Most of the stakeholder sponsors, they're non-IT people for the most part. And so I was like in the middle. I feel like the translator between the customer and the coder. I could talk enough coding that they wouldn't snow me, and I got better at that. So once they knew that I knew the lingo and knew enough that they couldn't pull one over on me, and I could walk and talk, then they were definitely on board. And then they saw the benefit is like, well, I was help be that translator between the requirements and the business side and the coders. And once I understood that need, and I really do think, at least in my experience, there was a great need for that. And a lot of projects who didn't do well didn't have that business analyst, project manager, translator to make the whole thing work. And so I definitely think that there's exceptions to that, and there's certain projects where you have to have somebody who's got the knowledge. But in that case, maybe pair with somebody who can add that component of the business side and work as a team. Now, there are some IT people that have great people skills and they can talk the business language. And if that's the case, then that's perfect. Hope that answered the question.
Awesome, thank you.
Good question.
So how formal does the charter need to be? Does it always need requirement by a sponsor to be valid?
Okay, so I would always go guidance with your company or your PMO or your established, but if I would say that even informal is better than nothing. So even if I have an informal document, I put it in meeting minutes. Meeting minutes, emails, that formalizes it, and from the PMI perspective. And in our companies and businesses now, an email is a formal document. They can take you to court, or they can, present evidence in court from email. So although we'd like to have signatures and sign-offs and all those good things, if for some reason the environment, it just doesn't happen, I still would have the information documented in meeting minutes and, do the whole thing with, the change control and all that through, the team meetings. And team meetings are powerful ways to document things. And put your meeting minutes up there in the cloud and review, communicate. I mean, yeah, we'd like to see everything signed off, but circumstances doesn't always happen. So as formal as you can make it is always the best. Informal is better than certainly having nothing put on paper. We've all been I'm sure been in that position where, wasn't the documentation and requirements what it is we would like it.
Awesome. All right. Can you be a successful project manager without using a project charter, or can a project manager be covering the topics in the project charter when not using a project charter document?
Okay, so again, I go back to you've got your bases covered, because I think we've got the standard areas, the risks, the assumptions, constraints, the requirements, the business need, the justification. You've got those covered. You've had those conversations. You've got your quality and your criteria covered. You use your team meetings to keep everybody informed and documented. So I think maybe what you're asking, I'm not sure, is maybe you just don't have a piece of paper with the word charter on it or some other word that means charter with a signature on it. And as long as in your organization you have what you need to spend money, to get resources to hold the meetings, whether or not it's called a charter, whether or not you have that little signature on the bottom line, then I'd say yes, you definitely can be successful. Whether or not you have a piece of paper, you've got everything covered. You've got those topics covered. You've worked through change control, communicated with your meeting minutes without a piece of paper with the name of charter on it. So I would say, from what I understand, the question is, yes, you definitely can be successful because you're doing the intent. I think the charter is just a tool to help us organize the information. Yeah, hope that answered the question.
Yes, it did, and they said thank you.
Uh,
Okay, guys.
I
Well,
don't, you don't have to have a charter because it's like, well, they'll get me in trouble with a PMO somewhere. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Anything else, Denise?
okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for those questions. We have a lot of
Yeah,
great comments in there that I'm sure we'll review. And thank you, Diane, for taking the time to going through all these great questions with us today.
thank you.
Um,
Thanks
so,
everybody for participating today. I hope you got some good ideas out of it.
yes, if not, we can always ask you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. So upcoming webinars. Um, we do have the PM in Theory Earned Value Basics coming next month on Wednesday, March 8th. That's from 8 a.m. Pacific Time and 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So the earned value management is one of those key concepts that you have to learn in order to pass your PM exam. However, most organizations are not utilizing this tool. So in this one, we'll find out why, and in this first webinar, we will review the basics of earned value management to deepen your understanding of what it means and why this tool is so important to evaluating project performance. So it sounds like a good one. If you have not already registered for this, I encourage you to do so right after the webinar. Go ahead and visit our webinar calendar. If you don't know where to find that, please feel free to email me, and I will be happy to send you the link. And you can also deliver these at your own company. So if you'd like to improve your team and deliver these programs yourself and earn PDUs, Core Performance Concepts is offering a 10% off license per title. So feel free to reach out to them for more info. And also another special promotion for those of you that would like to continue improving your project management skills. They are offering 10% discount for online courses. I will go ahead and copy and paste that link into your chat box. You can also reach them for that 10% discount. And for PDUs, you will automatically receive your PDU certificate via email by the end of today. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, anything else I can help you with, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. You earn one PDU per webinar attended, and please remember that this only applies to project management webinars and agile webinars. And to register your PDU, log in as a PMI member to pmi.org. Go ahead and select course or training and fill out all the information below, which will also be available within your PDU certificate. And for those of you on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow, like, and subscribe to our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter. Our handle is @ProjectInsight. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube for the latest in PI news. And this is the place if you guys want to tell us how amazing and awesome our webinars are, or if there's any other ways we can improve. We want to hear from you. So this is the spot where you guys can hit us up, send us those comments, let us know what you want to hear for the future, any topics or anything else. That's the place to go. And in our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded webinars and videos for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next PM training, IT methodology, and Agile. We do have last year's leadership webinars all on there. So if you missed any of those last year, they're all up there, and our product training webinars as well. So that is all we have for you today. Thank you, Diane, once more for a great session and for joining us. And we'd like to thank our audience, as usual, for your time, and we hope to see you guys next time. Until then, have a good one, guys. Have a good rest of your week. Have a good weekend, and we will see you next month.